This is The Express with Gary Allen, your 360-degree view of the world. Now, here's your host, Gary Allen.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of The Express. Gary Allen with you here. You're humble but glad to have you with me, host. Before we get into tonight's guest, I just want to say I'm grateful to all of you. Randy Jones, I know you're out there listening in. Thank you so much. You've been a faithful listener since day one. And I want to thank everybody else for taking the opportunity to take a few minutes out of your day to join us. We have a fabulous guest tonight. But just a reminder for all of you, if you want to know a little bit more about me, you can go to my website. That's Gary Allen, ALAN, talkshow.com. It'll also tell you there some of the other places you can find this show. Thursday night at 7 p.m., this program repeats itself on diversitybroadcastnetwork.com, as well as progressivevoices.com as of Friday. You can go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com, Gary Allen The Express, and check out some of my past shows. And I also think on the website, and I'm trying to remember because we did that part of it a while ago back, there's also a place where you can find the archives for all past shows. My guest was on one of those past shows, and he's going to be joining us. As a matter of fact, he joins us now. But before we get to Mr. West, a dear friend of mine who puts out a better blog about this show than I did, that's for sure. For those of you that are politically minded, every once in a while I will make a comment. This White House, I don't think, and I know, Randy, you're hearing me. I don't think Hollywood could have wrote a better, funnier script than what's going on in Washington right now. But let me introduce my guest for you now. Randy West is one of the most versatile and respected voiceover performers and television artists in the business today. He has worked with some of the top-notch people in the game show business. He's done game shows The Price is Right, NBC's Deal or No Deal. He's worked the network and syndicated versions of The Weakest Link, which brings up my marriage. He's also worked with some of the finest people in the round. Of course, his mentor, Johnny Olson, Roddy, and of course, our dear friend, Wink Martindale. He's also worked with Dick Clark, Howie Mandel, Chuck Worley, 2 for 2, and Ryan Seacrest, as well as Bob Barker, who is the king of The Price is Right. Hey, Randy is one of the dearest gentlemen you'll ever meet in the world. He's one of the kindest, nicest guys you're ever going to meet. He's a true professional in every sense of the word, and I'm very pleased and happy to call him friend. He's also worked with some of the people that I've worked with, Game Show America, which is how we became friends. So without further ado, Mr. Randy West. Good evening to you, sir, and welcome to the Express.
It's unbelievable. Normally one has to die to hear such an amazing litany of kind words. That's wonderful. Well, thank you.
Well, if you plan on doing something in that area before we go off the air, please let me know. I'm Jewish. I like to sell tickets to those things.
I promise to be alive for at least another 58 minutes.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
And I want you to know now, just a minute now, 58 minutes. I'm on an old Ma Bell AT&T landline, so we could have the best quality because the cell phones, iffy. But yes. I'm going to have, 58 minutes on Ma Bell when they used to charge you by the calls, and they have you by the calls.
Yes.
I could have to sell my body to pay this phone bill.
Oh, God, yes. Oh, God, yes. As a matter of fact, you want to know the funny thing, Randy? I know people that still, when they say, well, what kind of a long distance plan do you have? And I said, unlimited, like 99% of the world. Well, I don't have that. And this is my own sister. And I go, what do you mean you don't have unlimited long distance? Well, I mean, it's just an extra expense. I'd rather make the long distance phone call. And I said, how much did you, when you call Elizabeth in California? Oh, it's about $8 or $9. I said, for that amount of money, you can get unlimited long distance.
Well, I just moved. I'm 4 days into this new address, and I don't even know what my plan is here. My plan is not to go bankrupt. That's the plan.
Did you move from one part of L.A. to the other, or did you just move out of L.A. completely?
No. I couldn't possibly leave. I got too tired of looking at somebody's exhaust pipe on the freeways and moved to the center of everything. I'm in beautiful downtown Burbank. And there really is a beautiful downtown Burbank.
Yes, there is. I keep telling people, as a matter of fact, Jay Leno's garage is right there in beautiful downtown Burbank, right at the airport, because it's an old, I don't remember if it's a United Airlines hangar or a Continental Airlines hangar that he bought where he stores all his automobiles. I've been there many, many times. And, he's often.
Yeah. When I was working at NBC, Weakest Link and Supermarket Sweep, he would drive a different car every day. And he would say, "Hey, Randy, look at this one here. This is steam-powered." I said, "My God, he has steam-powered cars."
Yes, and Jay's old enough, and he's just a few years. Well, he's just a few years older than me, and I'm a little bit older than you. But yeah, he's something. He got a bad rap when he got the Tonight Show. I don't know why critics don't like him. He's one of the nicest guys.
Oh, he is the kindest, sweetest. I got to tell you a quick funny story.
Go ahead.
He's a big motorcycle head. He goes out every weekend and he goes on the rides with all those guys, with the leather and all that fun stuff. If you're into that kind of leather.
Will Schreiner, who's a friend of mine, goes with him a lot.
Oh, that's great. So the people at BMW, I didn't know they make motorcycles, but they do, and they sent him from Bavaria like a prototype of the next year's motorcycle model. I didn't know. It's like cars, there's a new model every year. So he's at NBC, and everyone's gathered around because this is a tricked-out machine. This is like something in a James Bond movie. And he said, "Randy, why don't you ride it? Ride it down to Midway here." And there's like maybe 300 feet of asphalt. And I said, "No, you don't understand. I don't ride motorcycle. I wouldn't know where." He said, "Yeah, this is the gas here, and this is the brake, and this is where you shift. Come on, Randy." And he started to humiliate me for being chicken in front of all these people. So I don't know what possessed me. I've never, ever driven a motorcycle before in my life. I got on this thing, and I was like, "Oh, my God, if I fall with this thing, God only knows what it's worth, $100,000. It's irreplaceable. It's, from the factory." And all I did was go about 2 miles an hour all the way down. And I said, "Oh, God, how am I going to turn this thing around?" And I thank God I just made it. I got off. I kissed the ground. He said, "Yeah, you've ridden before." And I'm like, "Jay, you have no idea. My heart was in my mouth." But he's that kind of a generous guy. He's just amazing.
I have a picture on my wall here right in front of me on a motorcycle, one of his, in front of the NBC building right there in beautiful downtown Burbank when I did the show, 11 years ago. I guess it was, because I did Jay Leno impersonator for a while out of Vegas, and he had me on the show one time, and I got to do it. I got to do it pretty good, with him, and he was pretty good. But I've known Jay for a number of years. He used to ride, for everybody out there, Melrose Boulevard, and was right by the Improv where he used to hang out. Right. And you could hear Jay miles away on one of his motorcycles. People would say, "What in the name of God is that noise?" I said, "Oh, it's Leno. He's coming to the Improv."
Here comes Leno again. Yeah.
Here comes Leno. He would sit there. Honest to God, how nice he is. He would sit there, and if he knew you were really working hard at your craft, it'd be a round table of comics throwing ideas out there, and he'd say, "Hey, I got an idea. That joke you said the other night. I got a bit. Here's an idea, the way you can really kind of really put it all together." I mean, he's just he got such a bad rap. And that
all this stuff is so political. When I was filling in on The Price is Right, there was online vote for your favorite announcer thing. I don't know what, but the clause started to come out. And it's just crazy. It's all political, and it needn't be. We're all, just trying to survive and make a career for ourselves. Burton Richardson, another great announcer. We didn't ever become friendly until maybe 10 years ago, and we've been in the business paralleling each other's lives, me losing gigs to him, vice versa, for 30 years. And we've now become great buddies, but for the longest time, I guess people cast us as competitors.
Yeah, I mean, it was the same thing when I traveled on the road with Engelbert. People would say, well, does he like Tom Jones? Yeah, they're good friends, for God's sakes. The Rolling Stones and the Beatles are at war. No, they're not.
Right.
These guys grew up together. They all knew each other. It's like we have to pit one against the other in order to fulfill some sort of emptiness within ourselves. Anyway, Randy,
wow! This is getting serious now. I should be lying down on the couch.
By the way, your post for this show.
Listen, you had a Jerry Clifton's son on, a radio consultant. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes.
Yes. I forget his first name, but I knew Jerry. And, radio promos, I mean, I wrote that stuff for years, stay tuned for this and that and that and this. Clever writing. So thank you very much for recognizing
well,
that.
Come on. You and I have been friends for a lot of years now, and you always amaze me with some of your craziness. It just is. You got started.
So the audience is if anyone's still left now, 9 minutes into this conversation, because we haven't really said anything that's juicy. Do you think people stay with us just for the chit chat, or do we need to get down and dirty?
No, hey, listen, I'm gonna grill you like a cheese sandwich, pal. So watch out. You started as far as your love for game shows when you were living in New York. Yeah. And you used to go as a kid. I guess your mom and dad would take you.
No, hell no. I would cut school. They would never want me to do this.
Really?
I would cut class, get on the subway. New York is so easy to get around in. And they thought I was at school because my father wanted nothing more than for me to not be in the business. So every time I hung around it made him crazy. No, but I would cut classes, go down to NBC, watch them tape TV shows, The Tonight Show, every game show, left and right, one up and down the other. I would finally follow Johnny Olson from studio to studio and became friendly with him.
And finally, Johnny said,
that was when I knew what I wanted to do for a living. So many people, what do I want to do? What excites me? What do I have passion for? I feel bad for people who can't, get themselves cast in something that, really turns them on. But I knew early what I wanted to do. The question was, would I ever get a chance to do it? And Johnny Olson said, you can do this. You have the passion. You have the knowledge. Go home and read this copy into a tape machine and send it to me. I mean, he was that encouraging. It was wonderful.
Johnny, I heard from not only you, but from Wink and a lot of other people that we're friends with, always said Johnny Olson was one of the kindest guys around. And I know we're throwing that word around a little bit tonight, but folks, there are genuinely really good people in the business. I have a friend of mine who's over at CBS. He's been on The Young and the Restless forever. And he says the hard part is when you get these young actors in and they really don't have a lot of background behind them. They're so insecure. They're hostile to everybody on set, and they don't last very long. But the real pros like Johnny Olson and you and Wink, you're just calm and collected. You come in, you do your thing, and you leave. It's like Bob.
I've learned how to do that. Thank you for grouping me with people who have that as a natural born gift. I've had to learn to chill.
Yeah, we've got them at the radio station that I work at. And, they're always talking about their guests and other things. Like I did my show last night. My brother was on, Father Greg, who's also been on this show. And it's like my boss will often ask me, oh, did you know so-and-so in L.A.? Yeah, I knew him. What was he like? Yeah, he's a nice guy, It's like, he says, Gary, you don't ever seem to be impressed. I said, no, I was around it all my life. I grew up with it. It's
how did that come to be? Were your parents in the business?
No. My dad was an airline pilot. My mom was an interior designer. But my uncle Tubby Boots was a comedian on Miami Beach.
I know Tubby Boots. Yes, down in Florida. He was the king of the nightclub circuit down there for
he was the bluest time. Yeah, he was blue as can be on stage, but he was also funny when he was not being blue. But I would often get phone calls. I've told this story on the show before. I got a phone call one day, and he said, this was like in February. He said, what are you doing? I said, I just got through mowing the lawn. He said, well, put on your clothes. I'm going to go down to Fontainebleau, have some lunch with some friends. I said, hey, okay, that sounds great. I had nothing planned. He came over, picked me up. We went down to the Fontainebleau. We walk into the restaurant to have lunch with Frank, Sammy, and Dean.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That doesn't it's no better than that. Yeah.
Yeah, which began a long life friendship with Dean and with Richie, who just recently passed away, Richie Martin, and Frank, who was cool, and Sammy, who I thought was the greatest entertainer that I ever saw. But yeah, that's how I got into it. Plus, my best friend's mother was a casting director, and I used to get cast in movies and stuff. So although this isn't where I wanted to be an airline pilot like my dad. But
really? Isn't that funny? Because most people working for an airline want to be in show business.
Yeah, but it didn't end up that way. The Lord had something else for me. When was it that you decided, though? You knew you could make a living at it because you went to work in radio, and you worked like a lot of us in a number of radio stations throughout the country. But when did you finally decide, hey, I've had enough in New York, I'm going to L.A.?
1978, I came out here to visit a friend, Joey Reynolds. Joey is on WABC and KABC now on Sunday nights, but he's a radio legend. And he was out here. I came to visit him in '78, and I wanted to see L.A., and he said he was working for 20th Century Fox Records at the time, and he said, hey, Randy, it just turns out that when you're going to be in L.A., we're going to be going to Vegas, so you'll come with us. And I said, I don't want to see Vegas. I want to see L.A. He said, well, we're going as the guest of Wayne Newton, because Wayne's on 20th Century Fox Records, and he wants to have a meeting about something. Joey was in the creative end of things at the record label, and I got dragged with Roddy, and Joey, who were best friends for 50 years, to Vegas, and didn't want any part of it. But by the time we left this trip in Vegas, we all had a job working for Wayne Newton, which precipitated the move across the country. So in '78, I wanted to see L.A. Once I saw it, I wanted to be here, and Wayne Newton paid for the move. And that was a wild experience.
I did some shows with Wayne, USO shows, when I was in Las Vegas. He liked my impersonations of different people and entertained the soldiers. Whether I was good, bad, or indifferent, I don't know. But
hey, listen, when you were in a foxhole, you're entertainment, baby.
Trust me, I know that one too well. But I was in L.A. about that time. I was doing Hill Street Blues and St. Elsewhere. Yeah,
watching them?
No, yeah, thanks. Thank you. Well, no, because I went to Carnegie Mellon, and Stephen Boschko was one of my professors. And of course, you know Stephen. He's produced a lot of shows. Yeah. And so I got work right away when I got out there. And then, of course, I was with the Groundlings and stuff like that. But, I mean, you and I, our paths have crossed a lot. And
we're brothers from other mothers, Who was in the Groundlings when you were in the troupe? Anybody we would know?
Saget.
Yeah.
Kevin Costner.
Great.
Barbie Benton. Yeah, I have a story that I can't say on the air. Nick DeTuro.
Yeah,
and a bunch of other people that went on to very little fame and all. But the only claim to fame that Costner had was he was the dead man in the Big Chill at the time. But a real great guy. I know I haven't really seen him since. I've talked to Saget a few times here or there, but I haven't talked to Bob now in probably about 15 years. But I used to talk to him a lot when I lived in L.A. But yeah, it was great. When did you become a warm-up? I mean, talk to people hear that term warm-up, and I had friends who were warm-ups for sitcoms. What's the difference between being a warm-up, and what does it entail for a sitcom compared to a game show?
Well, first of all, for a sitcom, you need to know the characters, the plot lines, the entire history of the show, because you're shooting scenes that may call back to something that happened in a show that taped 3 weeks ago or maybe 3 seasons ago. So for the audience to be in on the joke, you have to really spoon feed them. Now, this character here, everybody knows Seinfeld, so he lives, Cosmo Kramer lives across the hall, you see. I mean, you'd have to explain it, especially for a show that hadn't been on the air yet or didn't have big ratings, so that when the jokes came, they were in context and were understandable. In a game show, you want, it doesn't matter what happened yesterday. It's all about keeping the energy high, very much. But both of these jobs, they're very different for warm up for the different kind of show that you do, but they're all so unique. It's not stand-up comedy, although that's part of it. It's not psychologist, although that's part of it. It's not crowd motivational speaker, although that's part of it. I mean, it's an amalgam of many things, but you want to be funny, but not funnier than the show or the host. You want to be energizing, but you don't want to come across as phony. I mean, it's just a fine balancing act. But the people who do it well, and I don't necessarily throw myself into that league, but the people who are great at it, people like Ray Combs, Mark Summers, these guys started doing warm-up, as did many other people. These names just come to mind as friends. It's where you can do it well. You really are better, I think, more talented or have better facility use of your talents than you a stand-up comic or an actor. I mean, it's improv, but it's not it's not any one thing. It's an amalgam of all these different talents and skills. And boy, when somebody pulls it off well, it's marvelous. And I'll tell you, the best I ever saw was Ray Combs.
Yes,
and
the late Ray Combs.
Ever so briefly, Ray Combs was the host of Family Feud after Richard Dawson, and he got that job and so many others off of the warm-up that he did. He was working for Johnny Carson's show, which was Amen, a sitcom, and Carson came to visit. Carson Productions produced the show, and Johnny's backstage in the green room, and the show hasn't started yet. The audience is howling. And he says, "What the heck is going on there?" And he sticks his head out, and Ray Combs has this room rocking and rolling. It was phenomenal. Then when I worked with Ray, he was hosting and I was announcing warm up, and he would, during the commercials, come out and want to do warm up with me. And boy, oh boy, I never saw a quicker mind. And the saddest thing of all, of course, is that he was in a car accident. He ended up in great pain. He almost died on the freeways here, but they were able to piece him together. But he became addicted to the painkillers because he was in great pain. He'd been busted, head to toe, and that drug addiction just brought him to the edge of insanity, and he took his own life. Very, very sad, but I couldn't find a more talented man.
We're talking to Randy West, who is one of the top announcers, warm-up men, game show host, voiceover guy. He is super, super multi-talented young man. You're listening also to right here on The Express. I'm Gary Allen, and we're pleased to have all of you with us. Talk about what it takes to be, and I know your answer to this because we've talked about it before. You've worked with some of the greatest game show hosts there is, and of course, the king to me is our dear friend, DeWink Martindale. But the number one guy in the world that everybody talks about is Bill Cullum.
Yep.
What made Bill the best?
Bill had an innate sense of timing for moving the show forward, and also injecting his own personality and finding the laughs. Bob Barker also has the same balancing act. Finding a way to not get a laugh at anyone's expense or to go out of the way of what's actually happening. It has to be organic, has to be natural to what is happening at the moment, and never at the expense of the contestant. So it generally the comedy bounces off of something that the contestant did, because the contestant is the star of the show, not the host. And if you can find a nugget there and make the contestant funnier or brighter or more interesting than they otherwise are, knowing how to inject that in nanoseconds is what is the skill, because you don't stop the game, you just augment the game with finding something clever, interesting, that makes the contestant look good and never at their expense. And my God, Mark Goodson said, being a game show host is like driving an 18-wheel truck in reverse down a hilly, curvy road, and still being charming and entertaining.
Yeah, and you would know because you worked for the Goodson-Todman people for a long time. Mark was very, very good to you. Talk about that relationship, and then we're going to get into a couple of questions about today's game shows, and then I want to talk about your dear mentor, a gentleman who I adored very much, and that was Johnny Olson.
Yes. And by the way, we spoke yesterday, and there was a question as to whether I could speak about a gig that's coming up tomorrow, and the answer is yes. So whenever you want to get to that.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm on television. I'm on network TV, my voice. That's all. Nobody wants to look at me, So tomorrow night, prime time. In fact, depending on time zone, 24 hours from now. Yeah.
Well, what's it going to be? What's it going to be? Real quick?
It's Big Brother, and I did the show. I'm not in the house. I'm not talking to Julie Chen, but as you know, the players in the house go through all sorts of games and challenges, and all sorts of what they used to call Michigas.
They're crazy people.
Crazy, wacky, wild, and they put them in these wild situations.
They're just crazy.
Yeah. So I've done a few of these different themes, but there's one tomorrow night that is hysterical. What they do with these contestants or housemates, whatever, it's mind blowing, and I'm so proud that A, that they called me, and B, that it was a gig that I'm perfectly suited for. So it's very, very funny, over the top, hysterical. Big Brother, CBS tomorrow, 8:00.
I doubt seriously that there's anything in this business that you're not qualified to handle, sir.
Well, thank you, but it's an age and a city of specialization. So while if I were in Cleveland, no no ill feeling toward Cleveland, but as a secondary market, you could be the best at this and the guy they go a call to for that. But here, everybody has a very narrow slice of the pie. You find animation actors, the voices behind the Warner Brothers cartoon characters. Not one of them, well, there is one of them who actually was a game show host, Bob Bergen, the voice of Porky Pig. He actually did host a television game show, but for the most part, it's so specialized. Those guys would not cross over, and guys in game shows wouldn't be doing that, et cetera. Yeah.
So let's get back to Mark Goodson and what he meant to you in your career, and then we're going to talk about some of the modern game shows that are on the air now. Talk about that relationship that you had with the Goodson-Todman people, who for a long period of time, Randy, seemed like they were the only ones producing game shows.
Mark Goodson is such a study for a psychology major, and we can get into what made him tick or what made him who he was, what made Sammy run, what made Mark Goodson run. We can get into that, but most interesting is that he had Bill Todman as a partner, and Bill Todman came from a wealthy family, very much involved with the Wall Street, that sort of thing. And he invested Mark's money well, their money, and had a great business acumen. And when game shows started to disappear, there were a couple of times when game shows were under the fire. One was the game show scandals of the 1959 that area. And Mark Goodson was not embroiled at all because his games weren't fixed. They were not games for big money. They were parlor games. What's My Line? I've Got a Secret. To Tell the Truth. $50 was the big prize, not $64,000. So he managed to avoid that. And then in the late 60s, game shows fell out of fashion. And Goodson-Todman had a whole floor on Park Avenue in New York, and that entire floor shrunk to a tiny, tiny, tiny corner of the building because they fired everybody because they were off the air. CBS canceled all the shows I just mentioned, What's My Line, Tell the Truth, I've Got a Secret, all of their bread and butter shows were off. Concentration was off of NBC, etc. So what did he do? He invented, on a large scale, the world of syndication. And one by one, he was able to bring all those shows back, all those familiar titles that America loved, without having to worry about selling them to the network. He started selling them through an agent to individual television stations in one in each city, and they would tape these shows and bicycle the tapes around. That's the term. They would be mailed. You'd run it at your station and mail it to the next station.
Right.
And the episodes sometimes wouldn't air for months and months after they were taped. But one by one, he got What's My Line, To Tell the Truth, I've Got a Secret, all these shows, Password, they all came back after being canceled. Yeah. Brilliant business acumen. He never was a creator. The people who created his shows never were allowed to take credit, but he didn't create any of them. Bob Stewart created The Price is Right. He created Password. He created To Tell the Truth. I've Got a Secret was created by Alan Sherman, etc.
Really?
Bob Bach created What's My Line. Buddy Piper created Concentration, but you couldn't take credit because he did. He was not a creator, but what he did was troubleshoot. He could see the rocky road ahead, and he could edit. He could take an idea and edit it and adapt it, and he was brilliant as that. And his shows always worked. And my relationship was at first through Johnny Olson, and then as a run-through contestant, where they have new show ideas. You're invited up to the Goodson offices to play the game as an outsider, first seeing it for the first time. And if they know you're a good game player, if you invented checkers, you wouldn't know if it was any good if you took it to people who didn't know how to play a game and weren't, competitive and weren't, ingenious or, whatever. So they found good game players, and they pay us $50, and we would play the game and be invited back and maybe asked, what did you think when that second round came up, and maybe come out with an idea. And eventually I got to appear on many of his shows as a contestant, shows that I worked on in development that were pilots, other shows that went to air. To Tell the Truth in 1990 were among the Goodson shows that I did. The place was the premier television production facility. My God, when he had a hit show, everybody benefited.
Was it over at CBS, Randy?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
we did Tell the Truth 1990 at NBC, but a lot of his shows were at CBS because he had good relationships with that network. Most of his shows went to CBS. But my goodness, I mean, it was wonderful. If you were a producer on one of those shows, you got a Christmas bonus of $100,000. That was 20 plus years ago.
Wow.
You had a job for life. You may not make the big bucks weekly if your show isn't on the air, but you have a salary like the old movie studio system. You had a job. You were under contract, and they kept you alive and well and happy and well fed, even in the lean times. And it was tough to want to leave there. Bob Stewart, whose name I mentioned for creating To Tell the Truth and Password and The Price is Right, he wanted to leave because he had an idea that Mark Goodson said would never work. And they finally had a showdown. Here's his most talented creator, and he won't give him enough leash to try a show that Mark Goodson thinks will not work. So Bob Stewart left, and Mark Goodson couldn't believe it because he made him wealthy and happy, and for the most part, a prince. And that's what Mark Goodson said to him. But Bob, you can't leave. How could you leave? I've made you a prince. And Bob, not missing a beat, said, yes, but I want to be a king. And he left, and he put his show on the air, the one that would never work, quote unquote, and that was Pyramid. $100,000 Pyramid, which, as you know, has been revived yet again, and is doing extremely well, going to be in a third season, and maybe even come to syndication in addition to the primetime network run.
And I think Strahan does a marvelous job as a host.
Yeah, the first season I thought he was okay, but I'll tell you, they took a hiatus, came back for a second season, and the producers of the show really sat with him and they really worked out where the points are for drama, where the points for comedy are, where the beats are. And my God, what came back is just fantastic. I agree with you 100%. Michael Strahan is fantastic in that gig.
Yeah, he is. And they also, the guests that they have on are really wonderful in comparison to some of the other shows. Before we move any further, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this gentleman's name who helped revive, I think, game shows. I think you'll agree. And that was Merv. Merv Griffin.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Merv, my God, the mind behind Hangman, turning it into Wheel of Fortune, the mind behind Jeopardy, when his wife said, why don't you just give him the answers? He says, well, we can't do that. That was the quiz show scandals. She said, no, give him the answers. He said, what do you mean? And Luann said, suppose I said to you 5,280. That's the answer. And he said, well, how many feet in a mile? That's the question. And that was it. Just give them the answers and let them come up with a question. Brilliant. What a turn. What a quick turn. And they both of those shows had network runs and, of course, enjoyed number 1 and number 2 syndicated game show positions now for, an eternity. And there are people walking this planet who have never been alive, don't know what it is to not have Wheel and Jeopardy on every night. Their entire lives.
Yeah. Wasn't it? I think the original host for Jeopardy, wasn't it Art Bell?
Art Fleming.
Art Fleming. There you go. I'm sorry. I'm thinking.
Thank you, players and viewers. Thank you, Don Pardo. Welcome to Jeopardy.
Oh, he was
fantastic. He was a tall man with a big smile. His parents came from the circus, believe it or not. So he grew up in show business, but a branch of it that you don't hear a whole lot about. So he played to the back row. I mean, imagine a guy learning to, perform in the circus where everybody's, a mile away up in the stands. And he wasn't too big for the camera, but his personality and his presence were large.
Oh, yeah.
Brilliant casting.
You're listening to The Express with Gary Allen here. My guest is Randy West, one of the most marvelous, multi-talented announcers, voiceover actors, game show host, game show warm-up man. I mean, you name it, he does it in Hollywood, and he's a dear, dear friend to me, and he has been for many years.
And I do it on the road, too. The Price is Right live. When I was doing The Price is Right with Bob Barker, Andy Felcher, who is the son of Howard Felcher, a very well-known game show producer, Family Feud and others. Andy came to me and said they were thinking of doing a road show, a tour of The Price is Right, and take all the games out on the road. And I'm looking at him thinking, this guy's smoking something, So he said, would you be interested? And, of course, the first thing you learn in Hollywood is never say no. Always say yes. Can you ride a horse? Yes.
Yes.
You want to go on tour with The Price is Right? Yes. I want to do everything. Yeah, and I went home thinking, this guy is out of his mind. Well, sure enough, we went to Reno and played at Sammy's showroom at the Harrah's and did The Price is Right with all the games and the big wheel, and that was 15 years ago. And the show is still on the road. Still on the road. So I just came back doing a few dates at Northern California and near Seattle, and we go all across the country with meeting the people who've loved The Price is Right their whole life and never had a chance to come to Hollywood.
Matthew King, who is the president of Game Show America, who you and I both have worked for, we've often said people love games.
Yeah.
You know, back in the day, it was Monopoly, a board game. You watched a TV show, but people love games. I've never understood why game shows went out of fashion. I always thought, and still think to this day, they are fun. Now, there is a new version of Match Game that, frankly, I don't like. I don't like the host. I'm not going to get into it too far, but I just think and the contestants are just, oh my God, Randy, they're dumber than a box of rocks.
Well, there's a fear that they're not that game shows are not going to be interesting. You know, they've had a bad rap from some programmers who first took them off, and then game show spoofs are on SNL, and you know, it's the show business genre with the least respect. As Bob Eubank says, I make my life in the bargain basement of television. You know, no respect at all, and as such, programmers are fearful that a game show is going to, you know, be the what can I say, the target of you know, a joke. So they underestimate the audience's patience and attention span. So on Match Game, they bring those contestants around on a turntable and they're screaming. They're out of their friggin' minds. They got them all, you know, hyped up. It's just so unreal because they're fearful that nobody's going to watch the game for the game's sake. And I'll tell you something amazing. You know, all these shows, Pyramid, Match Game, Password, To Tell the Truth, I've Got a Secret, What's My Line, Let's Make a Deal, Price is Right. They all were well-honed games when they first came on the air, tooled by workmen, by craftsmen, okay? Then we went into a period where people felt, well, we got to change this, so let's bring Card Sharks back, and we'll show video clips, and they can guess whether the people on the video are going to do this or do that. Well, that has nothing to do with Card Sharks. It was a card game, higher or lower. And they brought back Pyramid with a celebrity in each Trilon on the big board, like it was Hollywood Squares, you know.
Right.
So one by one, I was involved in all these pilots and watched all these pilots where nobody had faith in the show. And you know what the game show did? They shot themselves in the foot. They were the Donald Trump of TV genres. You know, they just couldn't get out of their own way. So they tinkered with these formats, and none of these Frankenstein versions of the show where we'll borrow this from that, and we'll borrow that from this, and put it all together in one show. These Frankenstein versions turned off everybody, and for years, game shows were back burner until finally somebody said, you know, these are good shows. The generation of people who grew up watching the originals when they, you know, were sick home from school, these people now are the programmers, you know, and they remember these classic shows for what they were, just fantastic games, pure games.
Yes.
And now these are the people who are producing these shows, and all of what they're bringing back are now true to form, true to life, and the value of the show is once again recognized for what it is, and they're playing them just the way they were meant to be played. And look, they're working. I know that Match Game isn't your, you know, cup of tea, and Family Feud goes out on a ledge of risque material that I don't necessarily think is necessary, but there's no arguing with success. These shows are hits again. And it's wonderful to see it because I love the genre, as you do as well.
Yeah, I Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, I watch in the mornings when I'm at the radio station before I get going on the day. I want to talk a little bit about some of the people you work with, in particular the man who is probably considered the best announcer that there ever was for game shows, at least my humble opinion. You have also put together all this material that you got from Johnny Olson's widow, and you put it together in a book. I know you're working on another book, and hopefully I will.
The first book is Johnny Olson, A Voice in Time, and as you say, just to bring people up to speed here, Johnny passed away in 1985. His widow was put in a nursing home in 1999, like 15 years later, and then the family was cleaning out the house and found all this stuff and letters between Johnny and myself, and everything that Johnny had saved ended up being in my protective custody. And I found that Johnny had started writing a book, and there was the outline and a couple of chapters, and I took what he wrote, first-person experiences about the beginnings of television, early radio, Dumont television, what it was like to host the very first network entertainment daytime show. He had the very first daytime entertainment show in all of American television.
Where was this at?
That was on Dumont. It was Ladies Be Seated, and it was, oh my God, off the top of my head.
Was it in Chicago or New York or?
No, it was New York. Most of television, there was no actual cable. There was no way to get a show live across the country. So everything was done at the population center of New York and could be carried by the phone company cables to Philadelphia and Washington and Boston and down south, all along the Eastern time zone. And that's where all live television came from. And people in the middle of the country and the far west had to watch films of the television screen. Those were called kinescopes, lousy quality. But those early shows all came out of New York. And my God, even before there was television, Johnny was at GE's testing studios up in Schenectady doing test broadcasts that nobody got to see. So his writings about the birth of television are fascinating, what the business was like, how it was to work under screaming hot lights that were water cooled. They were so hot. They would pipe water around the lights to cool them off, like your car engine has water in it.
Yeah, with a
and the water would break, and it would rain down on people, and the guy who did the warm-up would carry an umbrella because it was raining in the studio. I mean, wild stories like that. So Johnny had all of this firsthand experience that I was just so happy to read and pass along in this book.
We're talking to Randy West, foremost announcer in the Los Angeles area for a lot of game shows. You're listening to The Express. I'm Gary Allen. What did Johnny think? I mean, did he think that a lot of early pioneers in the television business thought, well, this is going to last about 30 seconds? What was his initial interpretation of what he thought the future held for him?
He was very gung-ho on television. He thought it was the cat's meow, He loved being on radio, and he loved hosting television shows. And the more the merrier. The guy was doing 7 and 8 shows at a time. Some of them were weekly shows, and some of them were weekday shows. So he would be in Manhattan running from one studio to the other for years and years and years in the early television days as a host. Right. And when he started to get a little older and television ratings started to be important and youth became the fixation, Johnny was handed lemons, taken out of the hosting chair, but given the announcing position, which anyone else would have said, I don't want to do that, screw you, or, want to come down. He became the best. He made lemonade. He became the very best audience warm-up person. And every time he did warm-up for people like Jackie Gleason, they were amazed. And once he did a show with Jackie in 1961, you were in the picture, Jackie never went on television again without Johnny doing an audience warm-up. Flew to Florida, as you know, and never worked without. Wherever Jackie went, that there was going to be a TV audience, Johnny had to do the warm-up. And he would finish the match game on the Friday nights and get on a plane into Miami, then come back for Monday taping. I mean, it was a crazy life that he loved. He just loved it. And, he loved people, and that's it. That's it in a nutshell. He loved to talk to people, interact with people. He loved people, and it was a rare gift because people sense it and they love you back.
Yeah, there was a picture of Johnny and oh my God, you just mentioned his name and it went out. His name went out.
Jackie Gleason.
Jackie Gleason in his den because my mother decorated Gleason's home 2-3 times. And there was always a picture there. As a matter of fact, I was the one, I asked Gleason, and my mother was upset that I even spoke to the man about his famous statement of, you better be nice to the people on the way up because you're going to meet them on the way down. And he said, well, I didn't coin that, but he said, I'm credited with coining it. Johnny Olson was more to you than just a friend. That's pretty obvious to say. And by the way, I hope I get an autographed copy of the new book when it comes out. But Johnny was more to you than just a friend and just an announcer on The Price is Right, who he was beloved by many. Talk about that unique relationship that you had with him and how it helped you get through some of the rough times when you got to L.A.
Wow. Johnny had no kids of his own. So and I combine that with his general love of people. And he encouraged me. My parents thought this was just the craziest idea. Show business, my God, I'd better be in the shoe business. At least that's more stable. But Johnny encouraged me. You can do this. You have a natural flair. And he put me in the warm up. And at the end, when everybody went home, he says, "You see, you were funny there when you did that. Now next time you're here, we'll do it this way and see how that works." And, he was teaching me, and I sent him tape. He gave me scripts, and I would send him tapes back. I don't know how much he listened to them, but he would critique and encourage. And from a family that didn't encourage me, he empowered me as a child, and a teenager. That's very serious, heavy-duty stuff for somebody to put his hand on your shoulder and said, you can do this. Get into radio and tell me how that's going for you. And my God, that was really special. And I'll tell you, when I knew that I had really a relationship with him that was not so much something he was faking, but that he really took an interest in me. It wasn't just glad-handing me. I last saw him in New York in 1971 or 72. He came to Los Angeles. He left New York. His wife didn't want to come with him because she had been in L.A. when they were starving to death in the days of radio in the 40s. Yeah. But he wanted to do The Price is Right for Mark Goodson. Mark Goodson said, we're doing it in L.A. You must do it because the show is so full of announcing copy. You're the only guy to do it. And Penny Olson, his wife, could see that he really wanted to do it and said, listen, go to L.A., do the show. These things last a year, 2 years. I'll start making retirement plans. I'll build the new home on the land that we bought, and you'll be home in time and all that. Well, of course, the show went on until he died. And his wife, unfortunately, was unhappy because she was playing second fiddle to television. He would travel every week back to West Virginia. But when I knew that I truly had a relationship with him was in 79. I hadn't seen him in 7 years. I had been a teenager, young adult, and 7 years is a long time when you're growing up.
Yes, it is.
When I came to CBS in 1979, after not seeing him or talking to him much for 7 years, he looked at me, whirled his head around, and said, Randy. Then I knew that I had really made an impact upon him because he remembered me and brought me into The Price is Right, sit in the front row, sit here. I want you to watch this. I want you to see that. Look how we do this. Look how we do that. This is different than New York in this way and that way. And my God, that just made me feel that I truly had a mentor and someone who really gave a care for me. And at that point, I was now starting to, work on the fringes of game shows. And he never got me a job, but he told me who to call and what to say and how to, go in and do that run through for $25. Go in there and meet these people. And let them see you, and don't be too outspoken. Know your place, but be there, be up and friendly, and smile. And the kind of advice that you wish you had when you enter any new field of endeavor.
Yeah, exactly. You just said something very interesting. He told you what to say.
Well, the attitude, it wasn't scripted, but you're young and enthusiastic and you're passionate and you're willing to do anything. It's just sort of like a coach. Maybe that's the best way to put it. Didn't tell me what to say, but what my attitude should be. And that's you can't buy that. My goodness, when you're knocking on the door of any industry, you want to get into whatever, sales, you want to get into IT, you want to work for Apple. I mean, whatever it is that you want to do, to have somebody from the inside, clue you in to where the power players are and what's your attitude, what to say in the interview and how to come across that goal. I mean, people make thousands of dollars coaching, job applicants.
Right. I've always looked at it, Randy, like Be open, be friendly, be nice, be cordial. They ask you a question, you answer it honestly. If you don't
Be
know the
energized,
answer,
happy to be there, be the best person you are. Don't be
right.
phony. Bring out the
Yeah.
best parts of your personality.
And whatever you do, don't lie.
Right. It'll always catch up.
Yeah,
It
because you're gonna.
always does.
Yeah, it will catch you. And in our business, oh my God, people will often say to me, "Do you know so and so?" And I may not know them, but I know their reputation. Particularly when I was in LA, I got to know a lot of reputations of people that I worked with, but I wouldn't socialize with. And, that's the way show business is. You not only had a friend in Johnny Olson, but you also had a friend and a man who, besides our friend Wink Martindale, who likes to wear bright colored jackets, you had a relationship with another man who was on The Price is Right, and that's Roddy.
Oh my God, Rod and I became friends when we were both in radio. He was at WKBW in Buffalo when I was a few hours south in Poughkeepsie, and he came out. He had a friend who was doing voiceover in New York, and was one of the first guys who didn't announce, but would talk like this, very personal, very understated. His name was Rick Barbario. He's passed away some years ago, but Rick started to make a lot of money with that very intimate sort of approach for the commercials. And Rod came to L.A. to do what Rick was doing in New York, not to step on each other's toes. And Rod came out here in, oh my goodness, I don't want to hazard a guess at a year, but the 70s. And he starved, basically, but finally broke through. And his first television gig was Soap, because Casey Kasem had done the pilot. This is the story of two sisters, Jessica Tate and Mary Campbell. These are the Tates and these are the Campbells, and this is Soap.
And it was a milestone show because that was the first time that homosexuality was put on the national airwaves.
Lead character, week to week.
Billy Crystal.
Homosexual, right?
Yep.
And there was I don't know if it was incest, but it was certainly adultery in this show. It was the front page of Newsweek about this wild show that was going on. Casey Kasem saw that and said, "I'm out," because he had a very high morals. He didn't do commercials for meat products, etc. I mean, he had a very strong set of morality and values. The agent, his agent Don Pitts, had to look quickly for somebody who could emulate that sound, and Rod could do it very well. And if you listen to Rod on Soap, it's very different than anything he did on the game show, The Price is Right. Come on down. It's very different from This is the Story of Two Sisters. So Rod and I, my God, I visited Rod when he was just doing Soap, and then he started to do additional game shows, and eventually he wasn't under consideration for The Price is Right until Barbara Hunter, who had been a producer at Price is Right and then was a network programmer at CBS, had a tape of him doing the announcing on Press Your Luck and played it for The Price is Right people. And they said, yes, that sounds in the spirit of Johnny Olson. And Rod got that job. And the amazing thing is, in 2003, Rod unfortunately took ill, but there I stood at the podium that my friend had been at, Roddy, the tape day before, and this podium where Johnny Olson had spent more years than any other show. My mentor, and I wore, having Johnny Olson's possessions, I wore his CBS badge and a few other trinkets and artifacts and mementos to the set as good luck charms. And of course, the staff and crew at the Price is Right couldn't believe it. How did you get that? I said, well, Johnny was a friend. And there I am at Johnny's podium and Rod's podium. And it was just until yesterday now, we're talking
really?
15 years almost since Rod's passed. Yesterday, I had a chance to speak to his, his home care worker who was with him when he passed away and for many, many months before that. And I said, I always felt bad about taking Rod's job as a fill-in. I mean, he was not going to do it. Someone else was going to fill in, but I wondered if he felt it was disloyal. And I always had that sense that there was no, the closure. I never got his blessing. Right. And I always felt bad if he might have felt, because Rod could be an honorary person, and he may have felt that it was disloyal for me to do the job. And it was yesterday, 15 years later, that I found out, no, Rod was consumed with his own thought about his life passing away. But if he had thought about it at all, and he did mention it, it was in the family. He was not seeing it as disloyal as a turncoat. And I had feared that for the longest time until yesterday. So these people are still, even though they passed away, they still play a role in our lives.
Yeah, they do. And
I'll tell you about yesterday, too. I don't mean to interrupt you, but hey, you get to talk every week on the show. You talk every week. I don't. Yeah.
Well,
there was a big rumor around the internet yesterday that Bob Barker had passed away. And I got several calls. And, of course, all that is nonsense. But, the guy is 90, whatever he is, 3, I think it is. And he's in great health for 93. But I hate when these rumors start and people pass on and, pass on the story, not pass on the story about passing on.
I think crazy. I think some people just live in a room somewhere and they come up with these cockamamie stories. Randy, we're just about out of time, but before you go, best advice you could ever give to anybody who's thinking about coming to Hollywood and do what you do. I know the voiceover industry is I have a fairly decent voice, but I'm not going to try to buck the system on voiceover work. I did my fair share of animation while I was out there. What's the best advice you'd give somebody who's thinking about coming out?
It's a fine line. It's a fine line because you want to tell everybody to not take no for an answer, to live their dream, to do look at Danny DeVito. He's an actor. Who would tell this guy to be that? Peter Falk with one eye, his acting teacher told him, you're never going to work. So who's to say? Who's to say? Be the best person you can be passionate about what it is, and don't take no for an answer. Don't let people put obstacles in your path because people just can be negative. However, I must say something that most people would not add to this. Everybody wants to say believe in yourself and go for it full out. Don't take no for an answer. But I got to say, some people just aren't cut out for different kinds of jobs. If you are acrophobic, you should not be flying an airplane, things like that. So there are people who want to have careers in this business who I encourage to not take no for an answer. But there's got to be a point where you wake up my agent Fred Washbrook once said, you got to get up at 5 a.m, turn on the brightest light you have and look in the mirror and say, am I really cut out for this, or is this just a pipe dream? And I don't know how many years into the pursuit one gets to do that and try to answer that. But certainly for the first years of wanting to be in this business, bring the best game you have. Believe in yourself. Learn what you can about the business. Be around it. Watch television taping. Go to studios. Find a mentor. Contact somebody who does what it is that you want to do, and tell them how much you want to do it and how much you admire them, and is there any tips you can get. Find a mentor. Be around it. Learn the best you can. Bring your most positive self to it, and don't take no for an answer because you have it in you. If you're passionate enough, you will find a place.
Well, Randy, I will tell you something. You've been a friend of mine for a number of years. And by the way, when you have lunch with the Wingster, give him my love, would you please? Very much.
Sure.
You are the best of the best. There is no doubt about it.
Thank you, Gary. And when you talk to our friend at Game Show America, tell him he needs to call me. So same thing.
I speak to him all the time. Now that he's in Colorado, living in his log cabin, he seems to enjoy his life there very much. We've been listening to Randy West, one of the top professionals in the show business community and a dear friend of mine. And he will be back with us as soon as the book is published. And we're going to get him back on because I cherish my friendship with this man. And Randy, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on The Express.
Always my pleasure, Gary. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much. And thank you all out there very, very much for your time tonight, your consideration. I know that you could listen to a lot of other shows and watch television, but for those of you that are always with me every week, thank you very, very much. For those of you that want to keep up with me, you can go onto my website now that it is finally finished. It's GaryAllenTalkShow.com. That's ALAN. You can catch this show on Thursday night at 7 o'clock on DiversityBroadcastNetwork.com. You can also catch me on YouTube.com, some of the old shows, Gary Allen, The Express, Progressive Voices. And then, of course, on Saturday mornings at 5 a.m., you can always catch me on 247thesound.com. So it has been a pleasure to be with you tonight. I thank you so much again for joining me here on The Express. We'll be back next week with another great guest Until then, would you please do me a favor? Take care of yourselves and each other.
You've been listening to The Express with Gary Allen. Join us here every Tuesday night at 10 for more captivating talk with Gary Allen. See you next time on The Express.